think a lot of people were surprised when we first showed BioShock Infinite because it doesn't take place where the first game took place, which is Rapture, the city at the bottom of the ocean. BioShock Infinite takes place in 1912, and it's in a city in the sky called Colamбия. And that city was created by the United States government as a sort of a floating emissary of American ideals that would float around the world and demonstrate the success of the American experiment to other countries in the world, with the idea of that hey, look at the American experiment. You know, don't you want to be like this? And of course, things don't go entirely as planned. And Colamбия gets involved in an international incident in China that involves the destruction of an entire city, and it sort of essentially succeeds from the Union and disappears into the clouds. You play the role of a guy named Booker DeWitt, who is a former Pinkerton agent, sort of a tough character, and he's so tough he's been kicked out of the Pinkertons, and he's seen better days. He's sort of living on the outs, and he owes a lot of money, and a man comes to him who owes money to and makes him an offer he can't refuse, which is to go to Colamбia, find this woman Elizabeth who's been trapped in Colamбia since she was a little girl, and bust her out of this tower she's being held prisoner in and bring her back to New York. And Booker goes to Colamбia, and of course things aren't as they seem, and he gets caught up in a pretty extraordinary situation. So Elizabeth is probably the most powerful person in the world. She has these incredible powers that she doesn't even know about until Booker goes and busts her out of this tower she's been held in, and she has these abilities to open open these tears in the world, which are basically, you see in the actual gameplay. For instance, there are things that aren't in our world that could be in our world, that potentially could be in our world. She can bring those into our world, like pieces of cover or ammo or allies who don't exist in our world but might, or turrets or skylines. All these things that are part of BioShock Infinite. And Elizabeth has the ability to instantiate these things, to open these tears and bring them into our world. Or alternatively, if you're being chased by somebody along one of these skylines through the air, to bring in a version where that skyline doesn't exist, and the guys who are chasing you will fall to their death. So she's got this amazing ability that you have control over as a player, as Booker. You essentially say, Liz, I want you to open that tear. But you do that at the expense of the other tear. So you'll be in a combat situation and you'll see three things. You'll see a turret, you'll see a skyline, you'll see some allies you could bring in. And you can bring in one of those things. I, as a gamer, may bring in the skyline. You, as a gamer, may bring in the turret. And it's just another thing that, BioShock gamers always expect to be able to play out the combats the way that they want to develop the strategies, their tool sets the way that they're comfortable with and they're excited about. Elizabeth's just another way, and her tears are just another way for you to do that. In terms of how easy it is to use the skylines, all you're doing is you're looking at various other skylines, and you're hitting the bumper and jumping to them. And the jump, the path of the jump is auto-calculated for you based upon where you want to go. You're basically saying, I want to go there. And it's quite intuitive, actually, if you sit down and play with it. And for us, that was critical, because if players can't feel powerful and they can't feel in control of themselves on the skyline, I don't think that's going to be fun. Compared to BioShock, when you play BioShock, you sort of arrive in Rapture when the story is happened already, and you're sort of being an archaeologist discovering what happened. A lot of the story has happened. Where in BioShock Infinite, you and Elizabeth are really the catalyst in a lot of ways for what's going on in the city. I mean, the Vox Populi and the Founders, the two sort of factions that are central to the struggle of the city, they both are after the same thing. They're after Elizabeth. And so we wanted to have that story, that there's still people who are alive and still people with their wits about them in the world. That feeling of you encounter people and are these guys, what's going to set them off? Are they going to come after me? Should I go after them? How should I act in this situation? Because we're trained as shooter gamers. You see a dude, you shoot him. We have the same challenge in BioShock Infinite in terms of making the gamer, bring him back to a space where he is in his real life, of you see people, and even if they're a threat to you, do you really want to raise the stakes here? Do you really want to set the water to boil? Or do you want to maybe see how things go and maybe not get in a conflict here? We had this challenge on BioShock 1, which was, the scene that most people are familiar with Andrew Ryan and you learn who you are. It was really important to me as a writer that the insult And I think the reason that scene worked was the insult was not to the character. The insult of what Ryan was telling you was to the gamer's understanding of their experience. And conversely, when we started BioShock Infinite, it was really important to me that the gamer build a relationship with this character, Elizabeth. Not just like, it's easy to say, oh, Booker, Liz, look, they're both attractive people, they get along, isn't that great? That's easy to do. The question is, can I make the gamer feel a connection to Elizabeth? Can I make the gamer feel that they're forming a bond with Elizabeth? And you know, and I think that's a really interesting experiment, and we're excited to continue the experiment, and you know, and we'll draw feedback from people and see how they react to it. But it's a real challenge. Nobody's really done that, especially in a first-person shooter. So that character, the big bird-like character, the 30-foot-tall pigeon, as you described him, he's called the Songbird. And he's a couple of things in the world. He's sort of the boogeyman of Colamбия. So he's used to frighten people, but he's also Elizabeth's guardian, her jailer, and her only friend, her only companion. And obviously, they have a very interesting relationship, and there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of strangeness that happens. You know, I think BioShock Infinite relates to the rest of the franchise in the way that, you know, I've always thought that BioShock was about a certain kind of storytelling, a certain kind of gameplay, you know, that you're very much in control of the, you know, weapons in one hand and powers in the other hand, being in this incredible environment that is feels very close to our reality, but also quite different from our reality and our history. You know, to me, those are the things that are always the heart of the BioShock gameplay, of what makes a BioShock game. Never, you know, Rapture or Colamбия. That's a secondary element of you know, the location and the time. And I think what we're trying to demonstrate with BioShock Infinite is the breadth of the franchise. That it's about a bunch of ideas that can be expressed in a lot of different ways. And at first, I think we threw people for a bit of a loop, but I think people now are starting to understand the direction we're going in. BioShock Infinite is going to be out next year, and on PS3, PC, and Xbox 360.